I just want to say I feel sympathy for victims and families involved in the Oklahoma City bombing. I have only had brief contact with my son the past 10 years and only know details from what I have been watching on TV the past few days, end quote.
McVeigh is John Doe #1, according to authorities, but where is suspect #2, the second person in the composite drawing? The FBI is still looking and hopes that some new evidence will help. That part of the story now from CNN's Anthony Collins.
I can see fires. At the time of Wednesday's explosion, a security camera nearby may have captured a valuable clue on videotape. The FBI hopes it will provide details about the truck that was used to carry the bomb.
We believe that at least one tape contains information that will be helpful to this case.
Investigators want anyone else with surveillance tapes to turn them over. The FBI says the truck used in the bombing was rented from the Ryder Agency in Junction City, Kansas, by 2 men. One of them, described only as John Doe #2, is still at large despite a nationwide manhunt. Timothy McVeigh, the other man who allegedly rented the truck, is the only person who has been arrested and charged with the bombing. His court-appointed lawyers say they want the case moved out of Oklahoma because it will be hard to find an impartial jury. And McVeigh's attorneys have asked to be removed from the case because of threats to their families and their own feelings of grief.
One of my primary concerns is that I had a number of friends who died as a result of the tragedy at the Murrah building. That has troubled me all throughout the last few days.
Investigators are focusing on McVeigh's friends, including Terry Nichols, being held in Kansas as a material witness. Officials say explosives were found at his home and that he may be charged with explosives violations. Officials are also considering similar charges against his brother James, being held as a material witness in Michigan. They say explosives were found at his farm. Earlier, FBI interest in Mark Koernke, a Michigan paramilitary leader, has faded. At first, investigators wanted to question him about a fax thought to have been sent by him or an associate. The fax alluded to a bomb in Oklahoma, but investigators now say Koernke is not a suspect.
The FBI says it's received some 10,000 phone calls from the public, and while that number is starting to taper off, officials say they still want anyone with information about the bombing to pass it on. Anthony Collins, CNN, at the Justice Department.
In Anthony Collins' report, you heard mention of a government critic and militia activist named Mark Koernke. No longer considered a suspect, Koernke answered questions Monday about the Michigan Militia and whether bombing suspect Timothy McVeigh was a member.
He may have come to meetings.
McVeigh or
We don't know, because some of the meetings are we have meetings all over the state, we've had meetings all over the nation. The larger meetings are 5,000 to 7,000 people. The smaller ones are about 700 to 1,000. It depends on the facility. It's possible he's even been met, or just as I'm meeting you right now in passing, we have talked. We may have talked. I don't know, because we're going to review a few things. But as far as him being with specific militia elements or being with specific groups, there's nobody that has any knowledge, at least in Michigan, that we've found yet.
Koernke went on to say in a rambling statement that the U.S. government itself could have caused last week's explosion at the Oklahoma City Federal Building accidentally. Koernke hosts a daily shortwave radio show warning of too much control in government hands.
In the past, recommendations on how to improve security at federal buildings have not always been followed. In fact, according to government investigators, required safety inspections are sometimes ignored entirely. Problems found included fire and burglar alarms that didn't work, confiscated weapons that later disappeared, and building security improvements delayed in one case for 6 years. A government security expert says a new review ordered by President Clinton should show improvements.
The American public is almost evenly divided between those who think just a few individuals are responsible for the bombing and those who say it's a large group. But the same CNN USA Today Gallup poll also found this, that 9 out of 10 Americans are confident federal authorities will catch everyone responsible. President Clinton's handling of events surrounding the bombing has helped his approval rating. The poll shows people approve of the job that he's done by a 12-to-1 margin.
President Clinton calls for new tools to combat terrorism and condemns the type of angry rhetoric that he says may encourage violence. Some people who make their living by angry rhetoric refuse to be quiet. We have 2 reports, beginning with CNN senior White House correspondent Wolf Blitzer.
A day after attending a national prayer service in Oklahoma City, President Clinton remains visibly outraged, insisting he'll do whatever he can to make sure the nation won't have to endure a similar terrorist bombing.
Our country, our future, our way of life is at stake. I never want to look into the faces of another set of family members like I saw yesterday, and you can help to stop it.
During a visit to Minneapolis, he continued warning political extremists to tone down their rhetoric, implying they promote an environment which allows domestic terrorism to spread.
They leave the impression that, by their very words, that violence is acceptable. You ought to see, I'm sure you are now seeing the reports of some things that are regularly said over the airwaves in America today.
His aides later said he was not referring to conservative radio talk show hosts like Rush Limbaugh. When he arrived in Des Moines, Iowa, he again urged Americans to be careful with their words.
When you hear people say things that they are legally entitled to say, if you think they're outrageous, if you think they either explicitly or implicitly encourage violence and division and things that would undermine our freedoms in America, then your free speech and your responsibility requires you to speak up against it.
The president is also continuing to promote his new counterterrorism initiative, the details of which are being left up to Attorney General Janet Reno to define. But some civil libertarians fear the public's rights will be compromised.
We are not going to accept that American people's rights have to be deprived as a response to the Oklahoma City bombing. We will all be affected by this. And this could very much chill political speech in this country, chill dissenting voices. And that's what makes our democracy work.
So far, the president has not tied the Oklahoma City bombing to his efforts to further tighten gun controls, though some of his aides privately predict Republican efforts to undo last year's ban on assault weapons will now go nowhere. Wolf Blitzer, CNN, Des Moines, Iowa.
The loud and angry voices in America that President Clinton condemned refuse to be silent.
Let's try Lou on the line. Hello, Lou.
Hello, Bob. You have Slick Willie, who just said is blaming talk radio on this. Well, you know, he's such a liar, but he knows that talk radio was bringing him down.
I think what he's afraid of is the fact that there are people out there no longer listening to the media that he wants them to listen to. And the fact that, thank goodness, that there is a place for people like me who think the way I do, and I have a place to go to.
The president didn't specifically name any programs, but he was warning that a message of hate was being spread. Conservative radio hosts weren't buying it.
This has nothing to do with the conservative movement. This maniac McVeigh, the Nichols brothers, they have nothing to do with the conservative movement. These are nihilists. These are people who destroy. These are people who bomb. These are people who murder. And I think Slick Willie has hit an all-time low, even for him.
The president's most renowned talk show critic denied spreading hate that could cause such violence.
Have you ever heard, sir, of the concept of blaming the people who did it? The facts have to be the number one concern, not the motivation. People, wake up. You're giving aid and comfort to the bad guys with this foolishness.
If anything on this day, the president's comments just inflamed the rhetoric even more.
So I got a nice title for Janet Reno, the Butcher of Waco.
Talk radio is getting either too much blame or too much credit these days. It amuses me, but it's totally unfair to suggest that talk radio is generating any of this.
There was one afternoon caller who did disagree with the host.
You're absolutely hysterical. Are you suggesting that Bill Clinton, Slick Willie, is correct to blame talk radio for this?
What I'm saying is that talk radio bears a moral responsibility here.
Oh, cut it out. Moral responsibility?
Yes.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that?
You give moral support to some of the extremist views taken by these groups, constantly bashing the federal government and the president.
I'm not constantly bashing the federal government. I'm constantly bashing Slick Willie because he deserves bashing. This is a democracy, is it not? We do have a First Amendment, do we not?
These are...
Do we not have a First Amendment?
Of course.
All right, thank you.
Richard Roth, CNN, New York.
Hi, Bob.